again to our session. I am your instructor, CPA Ringo Frederick. Recalling our last class, we had introduced the concept of IRR. The whole concept we looked at, we dig deep into that concept. So in our session today, I want us to handle an illustration question, which will enable us to understand the whole concept of IRR. And this illustration question of ours, it is the same illustration question that we did for our NPV. Remember the first question that we did for NPV, we had looked at an illustration question. So it is the same concept that we are going to look at, the same question. And the question Mwalimu is sharing right now for NPV. Recall this question of ours. I believe you can recall this question of ours, where in that case, the first bit we handle our NPV, what the examiner required us to handle, where in this case I was given the cost of capital, which was at 10%. The whole of this concept, when I was explaining NPV, we handled this question. Part 2 of the question wanted us to compute our IRR. And just as I had mentioned earlier on, that you can't compute IRR unless you have your NPV. Where in this question of ours, the discount rate that you are looking at was 10%. And 10%, which we had, our initial cost was 6 million. Look at note number 2, but at the beginning of the question where we are told that Kiwanda Limited is considering the launch of a new product M, for which an investment of 6 million in plant and machinery will be what? Will be required. So initial investment was 6 million, and in that case, our cost of capital was 10%. So having that case, I'll just use this question of ours here and see what you have, or because you have it, or you've taken a screenshot of it, I'll just remove it completely. And this is what we arrived at. In that question, this is how we computed our NPV. We arrived at our NPV and we got a figure of 308,675.26. That is what we did in that question of ours. So the same concept, the same question, I'll want us to elaborate our NPV, or rather our IRR. At this point, recall my present value test factor was 10%, and we got a positive NPV. We did arrive at the positive NPV, which my positive NPV was what? 308,675. So how will we compute our IRR, my good students? In computing our IRR, it means that I love to determine the NPV of a higher rate because my NPV was positive. And as clearly as we had said here, if my NPV is positive, the cost of capital is lower than the IRR. Therefore, we need to come up with a cost of capital that is higher than the original cost of capital, basically through trial and error basis. So we'll just select any rate which is higher than the cost of capital. And if it was negative, we could have done the opposite. We could have selected a cost of capital which is lower than the original cost of capital. Because at this point, we had determined a positive NPV, therefore, we need to come up with a factor with a discount rate which is higher than the original cost of capital, or rather the discount rate which was what? 10%. So in this case, I just select randomly because it is through trial and error. Mark you me that you have gotten this formula right. So in this case, allow me to erase here, my good students, allow Mwalimu to erase at this point. So therefore, it will be upon us to come up with a discount rate which is higher than the original rate of what? 10%. And this rate that we are going to come up with, you can take random rates, so long as it is higher than the original discount factor. So in this case, I can take the immediate value which is higher than 10. So therefore, in this case, we can take, of course, we'll be having our cash flows here, our present value interest factor. We can take 11%. then we have to determine our present value at this point. So remember, our cash flows will not change, they just be the same. So I'll just be picking whatever that we had here. I'm having a figure of 1866. We have 1866,000. We do have 1614. We do have 1614. We do have 1110. 1110. Then I'm having 2106. 2106. So basically that is year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and of course year 5. So the big question will be, do you still recall how to determine our present value interest factor? Recall that we said at any given point you are to determine your present value interest factor. Your present value interest factor will always be talking of what? Given of course the rate, given the rate and years, given the rate here, and years of course will be talking of what? The aspect of 1 plus r raised to power negative n, n standing for the number of period. So in our first period, we can take 1, of course, plus r, which is 0.11 raised to power negative 1, raised to power negative 1, which in that case should give us a figure of how much. I'm going to take 1.11 raised to power negative 1, which in this case I'm having a figure of 0.9009. So therefore, allow me to erase here to pick our figure, which in this case I'm having 0.9009. The moment you do have that case, and you have attended MDarasa classes for financial management, you don't need to struggle again to go through maybe your aspect of the tables, or maybe to go working it out like you need to do, say like 1 plus r raised to power negative 2, 1 plus r raised to power negative 3, inserting it in calculator all through. No, save your struggle by doing this. Once you determine your present value interest factor for year 1, if I want to determine for year 2, it will be very simple. With my answer, I just divide by 1 plus r, which in this case I'm going to divide my answer, divide by 1.11, that is 1 plus r, right? Because our r here is 11%. So that should give us a figure of 0.8116. Continue the same case, divide by 1.11 to give us a figure of 0.73, 0.7312. Divide by 1.11 to give us a figure of 0.68, or rather 0.65, 0.6587. I divide by 1.11 to give me a figure of 0.5935. So kindly, my good students, confirm with your table or confirm with the formula for calculator that you normally tend to use. You can confirm either with your table or with the formula for calc that you normally tend to use. You just realize that you'll be arriving at the same answer. You just be arriving at the same answer. Now, the moment you are done with that case, the next thing is to determine our present value. So determination of our present value, of course, the first case I should be having 1866,000 times 0.9009. This should give me a figure of 1681. Kindly confirm. I'm getting 1681, 079.4. The other case I'm getting 1614,000 times 0.8116. I'm getting a figure of 1,309,922.4. The other figure of 1614 times 0.7312. That should give me a figure of 1180, 156.8, 1110 times 0.6587. This should give us a figure of 731,157. Lastly, 2106 times 0.5935 to give us a figure of 1,249,911. 1,249,911. So that as at the end of the day, what would be our summation here? I should be having that plus 731, 157 plus 1180, 156.8 plus 1309 plus, of course, 1309 922.4 plus 1681 079.4. So I should be having here, I can clearly see I'm having a figure of 61, 52, 226.6. So that is the figure that Mwalimu is getting to be our aspect of what? To be our total cash inflows, present value of the cash inflows. We less our initial cost. We less our initial cost. Remember, our initial cost will not change. The same figure here, 6 million. So therefore, my initial cost here, I should be talking of a figure of 6 million. And therefore, that is to say, our NPV of the higher rate, I should be talking of 152,226.6. That is what you should be having. And clearly recall, Mwalimu mentioned that at any given point, with the concept of NPV, the relation between NPV and the discount rate is that the higher the discount rate, the lower the NPV. And the higher the discount rate, or rather the lower the discount rate, the aspect of what? The higher the NPV. And the higher the discount rate, the lower the NPV. So if you can compare our net present value when our discount rate was 10%, we had a figure of 308,675.26. Our NPV when my discount rate is at 11%, I'm having a figure of 152,226. Inversely related, right? Inversely related. Now, the moment we have determined that case, the good thing is that right now, I know you can recall what we just introduced, or when we introduced the aspect of IRR. So, our main agenda is to determine our IRR. Our main agenda here, we want to determine our IRR. So, IRR, recall, I should be having the lower rate discount for the lower rate discount factor, which my lower rate discount factor is 10%, right? I'm going to add, of course, I'm going to add here our NPV of the lower rate, NPV of the lower rate, which in this case, my NPV of the lower rate is how much? NPV of the lower rate, these are what we had, 308,000. So I'm having 308,675.26. We are going to divide by the NPV of the lower rate, which is 308,675.26. We less the NPV of the higher rate, which is 152,226.6. which is 152,000 here, the one that we just determined here, 152,226. All of this we are going to multiply by the higher rate, which is 11%, minus the lower rate, which is 10%. So therefore, what will we be having here as our value, my good students, if you can work it out? If you can work it out, what should we be having? I should be having, that is, of course, I'm starting with this. That is 308,675.26. I'm going to divide, of course, by bracket. I'm going to divide by bracket 308,675.26 minus 152,226. I multiplied by 1 plus the 10 here, plus 10. That should give me 11.97%. So my IRR here, I should comfortably come and say that I'm having a figure of 11.97%, which we can translate that to 12%, So basically, that is how we normally tend to determine our IRR. So the moment you're able to master this concept, you'll find that going forward, things will be very, very easy for us. And I'll also want to show you how you can determine your RRR using Excel. I normally love to kind of give you guys a practical perspective of each and every concept that you normally tend to study. So in this case, I'll also want to show you using the same illustration, how will you determine that using Excel? And in that case, you'll find that things will be very, very easy for us. So this is how you can work it out using Excel. Let me show you just in a moment now. So using Excel, these are what you are supposed to do. I'm going to share an Excel sheet here with us, which in this case, I'm having our Excel sheet. These are what we did using when the discount factor was at the rate of 10%. Now, we want to determine when our discount factor is at the rate of 11%, because if you can see on the board, basically we have said that to determine IRR, when the NPV is positive, whatever that you're going to do, we'll select randomly. That is, of course, trial and error. We select randomly a rate that is higher than the original discount rate. So therefore, I'm going to take my data as it is. Then in this case, I'll be having it at that point. So this time round, whatever that we want to do, my good students, basically is to use our rate, present value interest factor. We want to use 11%. So therefore, that will make our work easier. I'll just come on my formula here, where we have 10%, and therefore I'll insert 11%. So to give us our value there, divide by 1.1, divide by 1.1, divide by 1.1, divide by 1.1. So basically, that is the data that we have, and if you can look at our board clearly, the same figure will be having it. We'll be having the same figure. So my task here is we want to determine our IRR using Excel. We want to determine our IRR, internal rate of return, using Excel. That's the concept that I want you guys to master and have in mind. So these are what you're going to do. I'm going to take our cash flows. In this case, I'm going to take our cash flows. Of course, I'll be having all this, so I'm just going to paste them here. Then I transpose them to have them at that point. Then our initial outlay, initial outlay, or initial cost that we had, I was spending 6 million. So therefore, on this case, I just have 6 million because it's an outlay. It is an outlay. So having it in negative. Then I want to determine my RRR here. So therefore, my IRR, I'm just going to do equal sign. I have IRR. Take my values. So my values are going to start from here. Showing guess, I don't know what you normally try to guess, but basically we'll be taking our value, you don't want to guess, right? So these are the values that we had. So I'm just going to have them at that point, then equal sign. So we can see that our IRR here is what? 12%. Exactly. If I can stop sharing it, just go to the board. Exactly the same figure that we have determined at this point, the same figure that we have determined at this point, the 12%, exactly the same figure that we have determined at that point. That is if we are to use our Excel. If I was to use our Excel, that is what I'm also having. That is what you're determining using Excel. As I've said, it is simple. What you need to do, if you want us to repeat the same procedure again, and recall the beauty part with Excel is that the same concept that maybe I'm looking at it at this point, basically this financial modeling, you'll find that those who are in advanced level, they'll also be required to know advanced Excel simply because of the project paper that they'll be having at the end of the day. So you're saying that to determine IRR, you just click equal sign. Then I'm having IRR. Then of course, shift open bracket. I select my figures from the initial outlay, which is a negative. I just select our figure, then we close our bracket, then equal sign, As simple as that. That should give us our IRR using Excel. That should give us our IRR using Excel. So my good students, up to that point, we have talked of IRR. We've also talked of NPV. So in our next class, of course, we are going to look at a whole different concept. So at that point, thank you so much, and let us meet in the next session.